Hello, children. Do you know what your chess repertoire is? This is interesting because I've been rethinking mine over last week. I had a over-the-board match on Thursday, and I needed to get straight in my mind what I was going to play in that game. So I went back to openingtree.com and I had a look at what actually worked best for me in the past. And in that game, I decided to play e4 with the white pieces, trying to get into a Gurian gambit rather than the one knight f3, the Van Geet, which I'd been playing before, blah, 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 blah. And I decided if I got black against 1e4, I was going to go e5 and go play my normal Freddy Krueger repertoire because I was more confident in that than one knight c6, the Nimzovich defense. Okay, anyway. So all that aside, now we discussed it again on our Chess Bootcamp Live group call yesterday. So I thought I would do this, A, because it might be interesting, and B, because it might help me to get clear. And this is an exercise that I recommend that you guys do for yourself. So I've just created a new study in Lichess, and I'm going to go white, right? Simple as. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and show you and myself what my repertoire is. Now, so I'm going to go Van Geet, right? So here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a repertoire that is varied, that is interesting, that is fun, and that I'm going to enjoy playing. It's a bloody game. You should enjoy it, right? Now, and also one that ideally gives me a little bit of advantage. Why am I going from Michael Caine to Kasparov? This is silly. Okay, and I'll tell you, I've got this set to 1800 and 2000 Lichess, which is the level that I'm aiming to play at, right? And then later on, as I get better, God willing, I will bump it up to 2000, 2200 and whatever. I might need to tweak my repertoire as I go. The most successful moves at this level for white, and we're talking very, very fine margins, is one knight f3, which is the Reti, and one knight c3, hello, which is the Van Geet. Now, it's also played 0% of the time, so it's less than 1 in 100 games. Happy days. So let us look at all the moves that like the most common. Let's look at stuff that's played like more than 10% of the time. So e4. Right, against e4, I'm going to do this. And this is exactly what I recommend you do. Right? Start with a blank Lichess study. It's free. You don't even have to be logged in. Okay? And then look at this. There's only two moves here. d4, advanced variation. So this is like a Scandinavian, right? This is like I've played e4, d5, and then we play knight c3. Okay. So most common moves. d4. This is fine. We swing back round to c2. They'll normally go e5, and then you whip your knight out, and so on and so forth. And I'm perfectly comfortable with that, okay? So I could even add like a note here to say what the opening is. I don't need to do that right now. Okay, so I play e4. The other common move is de. And if DE, we simply recapture, and they're going to come out knight f6. We do recapture, don't we? No, we don't. We don't recapture, right? Okay, so here we have the opportunity for the Dunst-Pyrenees gambit. Okay, so this is my thing, right? I thought that looked unfamiliar. So do you see how easy this is to think, oh, I know my repertoire, but actually, I forgot it. They'll nearly always take it. And look, white is winning 53%. Because you recapture with Le Biche, right? I mean, you could go knight f3 and go for a crazy one, which also does quite well for white as well. Also bishop f4. Wow. But I think the Dunst-Pyrenees gambit, we just do this and we play on, right? So this is a bit like our old friend, the Hartlaub-Charlik gambit. So there you go, right? So that's pretty much one knight c3 and d5 covered. Right, let's go back a move. What else is popular? okay, we have this knight f6. Now, in response to this move, most common is e4, right? And e4 could go into a normal Vienna. I'm not sure about that. And we looked at this yesterday in my lesson, and again, you can see I'm slightly at a loss. I think d4 is the idea here. Was it d4, d5? This is now a Jabava London. And that, I mean, that is interesting. That has lots of the rapport Jabava system, it says. So maybe that's, I can't actually remember. Mike and I only went over this literally yesterday over the phone. But yeah, I think it was d4 that we came up with. E4 does well, and I mean, there's this g4 thing, right? The Tübingen gambit. That's just, and I mean, White does very well indeed. Has to be said, but is dubious maximus. So maybe I'll play the Tübingen in blitz, right? But I mean, this is kind of crazy. And you play like e4 here. That's a discovery on the knight. You win tempo. They'll normally play d6, blah blah blah, and then f3 to hit the knight. And you know, there's dubious maximus for sure. Okay, so we're not gonna do that. We could go Jabava London, and this is nice because the Jabava London is a sexy opening, and there's lots of ways to attack. Bishop f4 is very common. Bishop g5 is also playable, you know. So maybe I'll weave the Jabava London into my opening repertoire, which is interesting because it's traditionally it's a d4 opening, you know, and quite, you know, it doesn't matter whether they do this or they do this. You can get into that. And I know a lot of people enjoy playing this opening. So there we go. And here, of course, knight f6 is very dubious. You come in with this, and look at the 63% win rate for White. And maybe our opponent, you know, after this, is going, I don't know. Maybe they're not familiar with the Jabava London. I don't know. You see, if they play d5 against d4, then they probably should be fairly well prepared. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. Okay, so we've looked at 1 d5. We've looked at knight f6. So yeah, it's knight f6 we go into that, right? So there in d5 we go this Scandinavian. Okay. Now, what's the third most common move is e5. And that's really all we absolutely have to be looking at. And e5, I play the knight out here. This is the reverse Nimzovich. Most common moves are knight c6 and d6 and knight f6 and e4. But in fact, knight f6 and e4 are very rare. So knight c6, I know this. We go da da da, and if they trade, and I know we're doing well here. Let me look at this. This is great. 60% win rate for White. Yes, we've got a queen out in the board, but there's no queen's knight that can come out and kick her. She's tying the bishop down to the defense of g7. We're only a couple of moves away from long castles. All good. Happy days. Yeah? Happy with that. Okay, so let's go back again. So against this, knight c6 we've looked at. d6 is the other one, and this is just kind of... this is just quiet, I think. So the computer here says d4, and again, we're just doing super, super well, right? More than half the time they do that. Knight takes is actually best here. Okay, and here, look, I'm just building up a 54%, building up just a nice little practice thing. And you can then build this into, there are some, I might show you that in a minute, actually. I might show you that in a minute. Okay, so there we go. Right, so that's knight c3. I'll go force variation on that one. So we've got d5, we've got knight f6, we've got e5. Hang on. Yeah, d5, knight f6, e5, e6. I don't really think at 8% do we need to prepare against it. Oh, c5 is the other one. c5 is interesting. So against c5, I'm just going to do this, right? They go either this or this, it doesn't really matter, and we're going to go into the Grand Prix attack. Again, nice little variation on another exciting opening, and I think that's cool. But so what I'm saying to you guys is, I think this is what I'm going to solidify on, and stop dicking about with my openings and my repertoire. But I've got a nice spread. I think we've got a good spread here. We might get a Jabava game. We might get a Grand Prix, Sicilian Grand Prix. We lots of variety, fun for all the family. I think this is interesting. Okay, so that's against C5 and G6. Cross that bridge when we come to it. Yeah, computer says H4 does actually very well here. So this is, they're playing modern style, right? As though you'd played E4, they play G6 immediately. H4, just nice and aggressive. The Myers attack. Groovy, baby. Yeah, there we go. So, this is fine. Okay, so now, let's add a new chapter, right? Black. Let's call it black. No, go empty. And orientation. I think we should probably change it to black, don't you? Okay, so here we are with black. And by the way, Lee Chess, adding a new chapter, for the last week or 2 weeks, it stopped immediately going to that new chapter. It still stays on the chapter that you're on. I think that's a bug in the script. So, anyway, so black. Here we go. Right, E4. And here's where you can, you can pull up your opening tree, or you can go, let's pull up the chess.com Explorer. This shows my history on chess.com. Okay, so I'll go my games as black, right? X to flip the board, and looking at this, I'd say, so against D4, right? This is however many, 9,000 games on here, something like that, 8,000 plus. Okay, so what have I played? I've played E5 with 50% results. D5, the Scandinavian, okay? I've played over 2,000 of them with slightly better results. And I've played 1,000 French defences with 53%. So that's better again, right? And then all this stuff down the bottom, I said, oh, Ben, you should play the Caro-Kann with C6, but I've only played it 14 times. But I like, and John agrees with me, because John said so, he said, I like it when you play E4, E5. All right? How have I done with one knight C6? 175 games, and I've only won 41%. So I say, bugger that one right up the nose. Don't you? Right? So D5, I could go Scandi. I could go French. But I don't know. I like this. And anyway, so then we get into, let's go back to here, right? Because I like E4, E5. And you can get into all kinds of things. Obviously, most common we go knight F3, knight C6. And then we've got Italian, Spanish, Scots, Ponziani, and stuff. So you know, if you've been following this channel for some time, I'm going to play the Russo against that. Just switch over again. Okay, let's just look at these results as well. With F5, I've played it 53% win rate for black. That's good. That's really good for black. Like anything 50% or plus is good for black. Bishop C5 I've played a handful of times, so that doesn't really count. Okay, so I have done well. It is a surprise weapon. It ain't the most reliable, but here at this level, D3 is a good move, right? D4 is even better, but E takes F5. You'll get that 1 in 3 games at the 1800 and 2000 level, and this is just hands down better for black. Okay, and even with better moves, even with D3 and D4, there are ways to do it. So I think that's okay. Likewise, with the Spanish, I'll go for the Janish or Schliemann defense. Janish Gambit Schliemann. This does 51% against 44. Okay, we know all this. Similarly, Against the Ponziani, we go for the Ponziani counter gambit. Again, does very well for black. Now, you have to know how to deal with the Scotch. And this is where, see, white does well with the Scotch at this level, at the intermediate level. And look, f5 is kind of playable, 52% for white, 45% for black. That is actually black's best result at this level. It really is. But we go mainline. But then you can get into, like I had this nonsense today, and you can get the Scotch Gambit. So that will take some prep, guys, quite honestly. I mean, obviously the normal one here is knight takes, and then I could go for this guy, the Steinitz. And I do well here, and average does well as well. So we'll put a little bit of a question mark over the Scotch. Right, I could even add a question mark onto that, right? D4 question mark, so as though that's something that I need to explore. Okay, so what else is common here? And we've got knight c3, we've got the three knights, and then I can go for the winnower. Again, 48, 48. But I should be better prepared than my opponent. Again, d4 is the best move, you know. But that really is only white's only really good try here. And then we take and we play on. Okay, so but again, I should be better prepared than my opponents because they're only going to see this once in a blue moon, right? So they play the three knights. How often are they going to see the winnower? 1 game in 50, right? Whereas every time I see the three knights, I play it every single time. So there you go. Right, what else do we do? What else do we have here? Knight c3, and then yeah, Ponziani c3 is only 3% of the time, and d3, the normal variation, that's just boring. So we don't really need to prepare much against that. Okay, so against d4, we do this. Now, knight f3 is not the only move. We could see f4, and then things get spicy. So f4, I've been playing this. I should probably explore, what's this called? The Falkbeer a bit more. This is good for black. I probably need to, so I'm going to put myself a question mark on there. Put a question mark to explore it a bit more. So then now it's it's highlighted in my notes here. That's something I want to explore. I should probably go into the Falkbeer. I have been playing this c6 idea, which is quite rare, but still does okay for black. But, you know, there you go. The old King's Gambit. Now, what about the centre game? Centre game, I know what I'm doing. If they play the Danish, which they'll play a lot of the time, I play Queen e7. And again, we do well from here. So I don't need to worry too much about it. So, you know, this isn't me just like drilling every line, but the main stuff. Okay, so what else do we get after this and takes? Knight f3 is worth doing. Knight f3 is actually good for white. That is good for white. So that's something to explore as well. Because in actual fact, this is just very dangerous. I mean, look at this. There's nothing above 44%. So we've got knight c6 and knight f6 here. So we could do, what if knight c6? What are they going to do? They'll normally push. This is interesting. Oh, hang on. Okay, so we've transposed into a Nimzovich-Kennedy variation here. Hang on. So this, and you can see I'm working this out as we go, guys. I've not prepared this. If we go into this, d5 is the most common move, and that's actually good for black because we swing round. And we're going to come on to this in a minute against d4 because it's not the knight's tango, but it's not a million miles away, and it actually does very well. So actually, I'm thinking I may start to standardize on this move, so which is very interesting. Okay, so what else have we got here? Okay, so here against this, and we go there. D5 is almost ubiquitous. Knight F3, again, is good. But here now we're in a scotch. Okay? Interesting. But I don't think, right, that your opponent who plays the centre game with D4 on the second move is a scotch player. Otherwise, they'd have played the scotch. E4, E5, you know, knight F3. Interesting. Okay. So I think that's fascinating. So that's the centre game. What else have we got? So we've looked at knight F3, we've looked at F4, the King's Gambit, we've looked at bishop C4. We haven't looked at bishop C4, okay? This is the bishop's opening, and then we go for the Calabrese counter gambit. Black actually does slightly better here, and I've got lots of experience. You pretty well play knight F6, always on move 3. Almost no matter what white does, you play that, okay? So this is all fine, that's the Calabrese. I'm happy with that, I've played quite a few of them. Let's have a quick look. Okay, so against bishop here, F5, I'm winning 54% against 45. So happy days. Yeah, and I'm just slightly better in all lines. Good. Okay, so what else apart from bishop C4, D4 we've just looked at, knight C3, the Vienna. Obviously, we're going to have to deal with Viennas. And we just play chess, really, at that point. Most common move is F4, and you just have to know to play D5. And if they take, you take, and you know, how do I do against the Vienna? Let's have a look. How do I do against the Vienna? Okay, so I've played knight F6 most of the. There is the F5 option, and I have won 50% of my games. Right, knight C6 going copycat is okay. Knight F6 I haven't done all that well. I have not done all that well. And the Vienna is simply tricky. So maybe then I need to explore the Vienna. So I'm going to put a question mark on there. Doesn't mean it's a mistake, just means something to explore. Okay, so now I've got a few things that I want to go back to and revisit, which is cool. Right, what else do we have on move 3? We've looked at knight F3, we've looked at King's Gambit, we've looked at the bishop's opening, we've looked at the centre game, we've looked at the Vienna. D3, the Leonardist variation. We don't have to worry too much about this. Actually here, F5, 51% is black's best try. The King's Gambit reversed. Seems like fun. Okay, but I'm going to put a question mark on it. Although it's not very common because D3 is only played 1% of the time. So we could even just ignore that. Okay, so I think that's more or less it for E4, E5. Okay, let's just have a go back. D5, yeah, Scandinavian or French. You know, I've played those in the past and I've done all right. French has got more draws. But yeah, I like E4, E5, and I think it's going to make good content for the channel. But here we are mixing it up. Okay, so let's go back. All right, what about D4? D4, go force variation. Oh no, I can't. I cannot. E4, so there we go. So D4 now. D4, and against D4, I'm going knight F6. Right? Most common move by a mile, almost half the game's this, and it's the Knight's Tango. The Black Knight's Tango, the Mexican defense, whatever you want to call it. And we do find, actually, they play knight C3 most of the time, which is not accurate, because then you play E5. And I know exactly what I'm doing there. And this is also quite similar to what we very often get in this position as well. You know? With the white pieces. So that's D4. Okay, so what else might they play here? They might play knight F3. This one, this is the Indian defense. G6 is normal. We could go into King's Indian kind of thing. There is King's Indian with this move as well. I don't know. Yeah, they play C4. Knight C6 is not played here. And doesn't do well anyway. So here we just, and there you go. We've woven the King's Indian now into our repertoire as well. So this is definitely something to explore, right? From this position. So knight f3 is quite common. Then bishop f4. Obviously, they're going to play London, and we'll probably play c5 here. But this is also something worth exploring. So what have we got? We're playing against Londons. We're playing the Jabava London. I think that is a really kind of rich repertoire, which is going to be interesting for you guys watching the channel. We've got some gambits in there. We've got some non-gambits in there, you know. But I think if I, and this isn't like heaps of stuff to remember either. So I think this is interesting, and I think this anti-London with c5 is definitely the way to go. And you know, black just does very, very well. But again, stuff to study. So there you go. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you approve of this approach? And obviously, there's other things that you can do. You've got to know what you're going to play against the English. You've got to know what you're going to play against the Reti, against the birds opening and stuff like that. But all of that is kind of relatively minor stuff compared to the big two, the e4 and d4. And I can build this up, you know. c4 will probably just play e5, which is the reverse Sicilian, and just play chess, really. And against, what have we got else? Get f4, the bird's open. I'll probably play, is this the From's Gambit? Yeah, and just interesting. Interesting stuff. Well, I hope it's interesting. I do hope it's interesting. And wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun just to keep this on, by the way? G4 here has been played 2,000 times and just loses. Did he play H4 mate? Oh my goodness me. Been played 1,700 times. Checkmate on move 2. How about that? Anyway, that doesn't need to be in the old repertoire, does it? So there you go. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you approve of this? Shall we just solidify this? Shall we carry on? Shall I build it into a whole repertoire? Yeah, just let me know. Other than that, we'll play on. Thank you for your time. Thanks for watching. Hope it's interesting. See you soon.